FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
Diana had a brilliant natural instinct for the camera. She always did. I put it down to the fact that her father, Earl Spencer, was an amateur photographer. He was a very uncommunicative man, and the way he showed his love for his children was to photograph them a great deal, make family home movies. Diana, when her mother left, was, his little favorite, and he used to photograph her all the time. And I've often felt that she came to equate the camera with her father's love. Of course, that continued even more when she got married to Charles, and of course her fame grew. Of course the press wanted to photograph her. And more, as the marriage became more and more unhappy and there was more and more of a void in her life, she sought validation from the camera. The camera again became the thing in her life that that gave her the validation and the endorsement, where she would look at the pictures and know that the camera loved her, literally. At the beginning of her relationship with the press, she played it exactly right. Diana was a very shrewd, although she was a very uneducated and very sort of naive in many ways when she first got involved with Charles, she had a natural understanding of the power of the media. She was shrewd about it. She understood that it wasn't just about winning Charles. It wasn't just about winning the Queen and Prince Philip. She also had to win the press, or she would never win the prince. Because the press were absolutely a part of Charles's life. He was dependent on their attention, and it was the way he communicated with literally with his people, was through the camera's eye. So it was essential that whoever he married understood that the press was important and knew how to play it. She'd watched her elder sister, Sarah, who had dated Prince Charles before her, literally blow the relationship because she mishandled the press. She was too available, too accessible. She gave silly, indiscreet interviews. And it made Prince Charles very unhappy to see that Sarah was indiscreet and foolish, and it was the end of the relationship. So she saw from the beginning how important the press was to win over. And she understood that you had to be polite to the press, you had to be charming to the press, you had to be almost flirtatious with the press, not give the press too much. And for a young girl, that was an absolutely brilliant sort of perception. She literally courted those paparazzi. She knew their names, she read their stories, she even knew where they lived. She knew their first names. When they used to stake out her little apartment in Coleherne Court when she was dating Charles, she would invite them in for hot chocolate. Mr. Whittaker, would you like a cup of hot chocolate, she would say to James Whittaker, who was the most kind of bestial of the kind of, the press. She completely sort of won him over so that he didn't go too far. They used to pursue her in her little car, and she would dodge, and she would flirt, and she would laugh. And she just managed to keep these kind of press pack people incredibly beguiled and seduced, so that every day Prince Charles, who was on tour in Australia, would pick up the newspaper there, which was sent to him, and he would see these adorable images of Diana on the front page, and captions saying, "Is she the one?" "Marry her, Charles!" exclamation point. And he was totally bemused, because he'd left her liking her, thinking she was cute, but by the end of that tour, he just was. He really fell in love with her in the pages of the newspaper. He fell in love with her in the press. So the press was always important, and she understood that. Gradually, of course, she became vulnerable to the press because sometimes they could be mean, as she discovered. Then she realized that the press could be her weapon. And the press then became the way she communicated her dissatisfaction or her desires for retaliation in the relationship with Charles when it was going wrong. There was a wonderful sort of moment of sexual theater in the Diana Charles story when she was just engaged to him, and she'd already begun to sense that Camilla was out there like a kind of shark lying in the waters, and she'd sensed that here was this other woman who was mysteriously, constantly, somehow knowing the prince's plans even before she did, and she was becoming more and more attuned to the fact that Camilla Parker Bowles, this society woman that they used to go and stay with and so on, she always seemed to be in there somewhere, knowing what was happening and knowing what was going on, and she was getting more and more suspicious. Camilla, of course, encouraged Charles to marry Diana, feeling that she was going to be no threat. Here was this rather gauche, very sweet, very naive, well-pedigreed girl. She was going to marry Charles and produce the heir and the spare. Camilla would remain the mistress. Everything was going to be hunky-dory. So Diana puts on, for the first date, they go to the opera, and Diana wears, for the first time, a very different kind of a dress. I mean, this was a girl who was always dressed in pearls and pie-crust frills and little flat shoes, and that was the night that she put on the Emmanuel dress that had a very, very low cleavage, which showed off her amazing bosom, and she looked like $1 million. In fact, Lady Diana Spencer, one of the great social ladies at the time, said, "My, what a mighty dish to put before a king." When she saw the picture the next morning splashed all over the papers of Diana looking like an absolute sort of Hollywood movie star. And when I'm told that when Camilla saw that picture, her jaw just dropped. I mean, this wasn't in her plan at all. She was supposed to be, you know, a little shy country bumpkin, not this movie star gorgeous. So Diana continually used the press to send messages to Charles, send messages to the Queen, communicate with her public, make her points, and as she became more savvy and astute, the press became her tool, her weapon. But unfortunately, as I said at the beginning, they then became, she became a commodity. She moved product, you know, she sold copies. She became a money gainer for the press. You know, the pictures would go for thousands of dollars. And once the press had seen that she could really move product, once media barons understood that Diana was money, that's when things began to get very ugly for Diana, because that's when the pursuit was really on to capture her against her will, wherever it was. They didn't care. The lenses were in her face. If she was crying, so much the better. It was a good picture for them. It became very ugly and very brutal and, of course, spiraled out of control.